together.
Hello, hello. Thank everybody for being here today. Today, we're lucky enough to get a chat with Chris Porter, author of Paragon in the Current, which, first and foremost, I love the cover. I know I don't like opening with the cover, but the cover was just stunning. I love the artwork behind it. And the story itself was so unique, especially with the way you started it to the direction it went. It felt like on one hand it was foreshadowing a lot, but on the other hand I just never knew what to expect at any given moment. And it was a really really cool trip. I It was a very gripping read. We've had such positive feedback on it. And what you wrote on the back about a modern surrealist punk odyssey, I feel like that was the perfect explanation of it. So really hats off to you for a great book.
Oh, thank you very much. Thanks for having me, guys. I was looking forward to this a lot.
Likewise. So I saw Paragon when I think I was just asking people on Twitter, X, whatever, if they had any books out, if there was any indie authors out. And as soon as I seen the cover and the title, I thought that looks pretty cool. I need to check this out. And then the first couple of paragraphs, I think Mark says something like, I'm not a sociopath, and then just acts like a complete sociopath. And I was like, I really like a book that has the confidence to have a character just lie to the reader immediately. Like, even if they're not entirely aware of it.
Right,
But what
right.
really sold me was when they drove past the guy or the boy with a biblically accurate angel on a leash. At that point, I was sold. I'm a huge fan of biblically accurate angels. So start us off with not the titular character, but the main character, Mark. Such we try not to swear on these calls, but he's such an idiot at
Yeah,
the start of
he's
the book.
awful. He
He's
had
a
a
terrible
redemption
person.
arc for sure.
And it's a really fine line to walk when you're writing an unlikable kind of character, but he's not unlikable. He's just a bit of an idiot. Tell me about how you came up with Mark. Where did he start out?
Sure. Yeah, that's actually that's kind of where I hope this interview would start because
Perfect.
I really I wanted to have a chance to talk about like the process of writing this book, and it actually all
Mhm.
started with Mark. Well, it started a little bit before, so let me back up just a tiny bit. About I don't know 6 months to a year prior to starting Paragon in the Current, I was trying to write like a different novel, a much more complex fantasy novel with all sorts of moving parts and multiple timelines. And I got about
Mhm.
I don't know like 4 or 5 chapters in. I'm like, I can't write this novel yet. I just don't have the experience that is too big for me. I still believe in it and I really love the story and the idea behind it. But I was like, I'm not ready for it. I need to cut my teeth on something a little bit more straightforward. And I thought I was going to write a straightforward novel when I started. So what I did is I said, you know what? Let's just start with a character. I'm just going to make up a character who's like as little like myself as possible. So I made somebody who was just a complete jerk. And that's where it started. I was like, let's see if I can write a jerk, just some guy who's a jerk. And that was all there was to Mark at first. So I basically put him on a date with a girl, and he was just being a jerk to her, and I had no real reason for it. It was just me playing with a character, right? Just to see if I could write it. And literally I just never stopped writing. I just that date turned into them riding the bus, which turned into them seeing this strange thing from the bus, and I had no reason for it at the time, right? It was just well, I said this is, there's only so far I can go with just two people on a date riding a bus. I needed to throw something in. I was like, let's throw something really weird in. I'll figure out why later. And that's kind of like the story of how I wrote the book. It was basically kind of letting the characters just do their thing and throwing things into it and kind of creating a puzzle and a mystery for myself that I didn't know how to solve until about halfway through the book. So I
Yeah.
basically got to a point where I was like, all right, there's a lot of stuff going on. Um, I've brought them to a point where I need to know the reason behind all this, or else, like, everybody's just going to end up confused. Um, so I would say that I think I got to about, so if you're watching this and you haven't read the book, I recommend reading the book
Spoilers.
and watching
Oh
this. So,
yeah, no. If
yeah,
you're into the interview, go read the book first. Like these
yeah,
aren't like
please.
little previews. We're getting into the story.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that especially with a book like this, I would think that most of the enjoyment is kind of like going on the journey with them and kind of solving the mystery with them. So I'd hate to spoil it for you. So I would say that once they got to like the cliff when they're looking out at California, I got to that point and I'm like, what the hell is going on? I need to figure out what's going on. Um, so yeah, I mean that's basically how it started. It was just me creating a mystery for myself and me solving it along with them. And then of course, once I got to the point where I was like, all right, I'm trying to figure out what is going on. That's what draft two and draft three are for, right? That's when you go back to the beginning and you make it seem like you knew what you were doing all along. So hopefully it doesn't
Yeah.
feel like that, the final product hopefully feels cohesive and
So was that where the prologue then came from? The kind of quite fantasy-esque prologue?
yes. So the prologue, I can't say exactly, but I wrote it maybe like after chapter five, right after chapter six or something like that. I was like I got to a point where Kian had been introduced. I know probably a lot of readers maybe say Cyan or something, but it's in my head it's Kian. So Kian
Mhm.
was introduced and I really like loved his character and I loved the idea of him. Like he's been through so much, he's been through, so many things and I was like, well, let's kind of write his origin, and that's when I kind of got
Yeah.
the idea to like start at 5,000 years before everything started, um, and I think that the way it worked out with the creator junior and everything, kind of having the foresight to plan it that far back. I'm gonna
Mhm.
even though we just said spoiler warning, I'm still gonna try to speak a little bit vaguely, just in case. Like he knew something was coming, right? Creator
Yeah.
Junior knew something was coming 5,000 years later, and he wanted to prepare for it because he already had this opinion about humanity. Like, don't like where this is going. Gonna have to have a plan B, and So yeah, so for 5,000 years, he knew this was coming. He knew what he wanted to do in order to kind of reset things.
Mhm.
But yeah, yeah. So somebody's actually asked me if I was ever gonna write Kian's like tales, like like his adventures. I was like, maybe someday. It's not next on the list of things to write, but that would be a really fun
It's
project.
like an immortal alcoholic's journeys across the cosmos for 5,000 years. I'd read that.
Right.
And I love anything that deals with like humans living longer than they're meant to. Like a lot of my favorite sci-fi is about people who conquer death and then find out that now you've got nothing to do for the rest of eternity. I love
Right.
stuff like that.
Right.
And so I was thinking, see, when you were writing Mark at the start, so I don't know if you get this as well. Whenever I play a video game where you can choose to be a good guy or a bad guy, I have a real problem being cruel to people in video games. Like it
Right.
doesn't sit well with me if I'm playing like Mass Effect or Baldur's Gate or something. I'm like, no, I've got
Right.
to be nice. That's Did you find any of that when you were writing Mark's behavior in the kind of open chapters where you're like, oh, I can't feel bad, man? Like,
Well, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, because like I said, I was writing somebody who's very opposite of myself. Like I like to think of myself as a kind person, So it was just a writing challenge. So sometimes it's hard to write things like that. I mean, people have written much worse than Mark being a jerk to his girlfriend, but I mean, there's very little violence, direct violence in this book or anything. But yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, Dana's such a sweetheart, and such a
yeah,
kind person. And I was like, man, like Mark, what an asshole, Oh, sorry, wait,
No, they're
cuss.
fun. I
Um,
think I think that's part of what made it so, I guess, real is that everybody else around him saw, but he had such tunnel vision for what worked and what didn't work for him. It really felt, and I see this very much as a story of like Mark's redemption arc, for lack of a better word. Um, but it does feel like there is just this element of he's just so locked in and he won't, it's his way or the highway. That's all I was trying to say. And it was
yeah,
interesting to see that dynamic shift over time.
yeah, Mark's was interesting to write because, like I said in the beginning, I didn't have a reason for him to be the way he is, and later when I started like kind of learning who he was and learning he had, germophobia, and I think that he's in my own head canon, he's a little bit maybe on the spectrum or something, and he's struggled,
yeah,
with interpersonal relationships and, through no fault of his own, really. I mean, he was dealt a bad hand just like psychologically. And it's kind of like held him back his whole life. and then he's suddenly like asked to change on a dime after the gum wall. Um, and there's a lot we could say about like what happens to a person when you're suddenly just like healed, right? I mean, you're
Hmm.
healed of this thing and you're able to think clearly for the first time, but then you're put in this situation by higher powers, and it's like, how do you deal with that all within a day? I mean, it might feel like longer, but it was really a day, right? It was like a day and a night, and then the next day is when it all ended. So, um, for me, it was kind of like, uh, yeah, like he had some agency in it, but how much? And how much did Creator Junior expect from him? And was that a reasonable thing to expect him to just like go along with this plan and not feel a little used by by it all?
Yeah.
Which might explain his choice at the end, which I feel will be very divisive, which I know is divisive because
Oh,
people
I was
have.
gonna
we'll get
say
to
I
that.
some of the outreach I have received from readers was frustration, for lack of a better word, at the ending.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to tell anybody what to feel about that ending. I've had one person say that I think he made the right choice. I'm like, that's good. And I've had lots of people say he did not make the right choice. What was up with that? I was like, you know, I think he made the choice that a guy like Mark put in that situation would have made. It's
Mhm.
like I was just saying, like he hasn't really had time to grow, since
Mhm.
being healed, and you know, and he's felt guilty. He felt guilty for
Yep.
everything he's done in his life, and he's like, hey, this is a chance to start over. Yeah, like he kind of abandoned the Dana in the here and now, which I think, we could have our own opinions about that. I don't know if that was the right thing to do, but uh
Mhm.
I definitely thought about giving it a typical happy ending, and I thought that's really boring.
Well, I think
So I
I don't really want to. I don't want to jump right into the ending because I want to wax lyrical about the ending for a while. I thought it
Sure.
was a great ending, but for reasons that maybe other people won't pick up on, I thought it was thematically a brilliant ending. Considering that it's punk as well, and at the end you get a real sense that like, well, nothing matters. Everything's already preordained. It's all blah blah. And he took the only choice that I think he really could have for himself. But we'll get back to that because I don't
Sure,
want
sure,
to
yeah.
there's
Yeah, I'm sorry we
swing
jumped to
off
the
on it.
end.
no, no, you're good. There's one thing I want to say about it, and I think it's what makes, frankly, self-publishing so unique in that regard is that the ending can be whatever you make it. You don't need to fit any mold. Like I remember, I think it was the first one,
Which
Mark.
is punk.
Like there was Mark of Eternity. Spoilers there. Like that ending was like that wouldn't fly in a tradition. Like this wouldn't fly in like more trad publishing industry. So it's really nice to break that mold and to have just something where, yeah, leave readers frustrated because they're gonna think about that book a lot longer that way anyway.
Yeah, that's actually one of my good friends who was actually here in Japan many years ago, but he was here for a few years, and he's like Chris, your book. I forgot how he says like book your book pissed me off, and that's like a compliment. It's
Yeah.
like you made me feel
Mhm.
something. I'm like, okay, thank you.
It's like 6 months on, you're still thinking about it. It's like, oh man,
Right,
what a dick move. But here we are. Like
right. Yeah, I won't
So
apologize for it.
yeah, nor should you. So I've got my notes next to me. I take notes when I'm reading through everything.
Okay.
And I called it, I think early on, I wrote, calling it now, his resistance to the cold will be a plot point. And then I can't tell if it was or not. So I was like, because that stuff all goes away when he kind of like undergoes this transformation. And I was
Yeah.
like, was there something going on with him beforehand where he was like blocking everything out, including things like, personal like discomfort and disgust and things were what he was feeling, but things like the cold and empathy for other people and stuff like that, like other people's opinions and thoughts, were things that he just blocked out. Was that kind of deliberate? Did you go into that with that in mind,
Yeah.
or?
Yeah, so the idea behind the cold, it was another way to kind of show his transformation, but it's also like
Yeah.
I kind of thought of it as he's he doesn't like himself, and
Mhm.
by telling himself like, oh, the cold doesn't bother me, he's actually just like allowing himself the suffering, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't deserve to feel warm and cozy. So instead he kind of shifts it. He flips it around. It's like, no, I like this. It's kind of like a
Like
message.
ownership
Like
of
like
it
a
kind of
chip on
thing.
your
Yeah,
shoulder kind of, because it's cold in
Yeah.
Michigan. It is
yeah, yeah,
very cold in Michigan.
yeah.
So I got that, and then the I've got it here because I've got some was it deliberate questions for you
Sure.
later. So the alleyway, especially, see the things like the imagery of the mashing mouth and everything, because we built up this solid idea that he's got this really high sensitivity to like disgust, especially like when Dana's like snotters and stuff and all. But the idea, and this is what I really loved about the book, was it's really straightforward in terms of what it's telling you. It's like, oh, he has to go into the really disgusting alleyway. But that speaks to a deeper kind of philosophical idea that the thing that you want that's worth having is where you least want to look or where you least want to go, both inside and outside. Tell me a little bit about coming up with the alleyway. Like, did the imagery of the mouth and everything just come to you immediately, or did you have to like
So
workshop that?
yeah, so the alleyway. So okay, so let me talk about Junetown, the place, like the
Yeah, go
setting.
for it.
Junetown is actually based on my university town of Ann Arbor, Michigan. So I went to University
All
of
right.
Michigan. And Junetown, it's actually an inside joke, and I'll give you this is something that nobody knows other than my close friends from back home. Uh, so back before I went to university, we used to take trips from Jackson, where I'm from in Michigan, to Ann Arbor just to hang out. We just to like do little road trips there. And we it's called Ann Arbor, but sometimes we call it A2 or A squared. And then randomly we were watching Rush Hour, and
Right.
there's a bad guy named Jun Tao. And
Yeah.
we just started calling Ann Arbor June Town. That's literally where the name came from. So Junetown is just it's very, very strongly based on Ann Arbor, not to a T, but it's basically where it is in my head. I made up my own kind of connections for roads and stuff just for the plot, where I needed them to go and everything. But in Ann Arbor, there is a gum wall in an alley. I mean, it's literally there, and
Right.
that's where the I like, once I kind of realized that, like, okay, Mark is revolted by disgusting things, snot and phlegm and all these things. And I was like, I mean, the Gulma Alley is right there. Of course, I have to make that a plot point, and that's kind of where it came from. I was like, that's going to be the thing he has to conquer in order to kind of like fulfill this part of the prophecy, right?
Yeah.
And we can talk about prophecies a lot because I kind of have it's kind of like I approach it on a meta angle, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like what
Yeah.
like the way I thought about that was like, okay, so prophecies are fun. I mean, I grew up on fantasy. I love fantasy. I mean,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
The Wheel of Time is one of my favorite series, and that's just all prophecy. But you always think about it, it's like, why? Why do they have to go through all this? If there's some creator that's behind all this, why does he make him go through all these specific steps? And my idea was, it's entertainment for him, for the big tech.
I have in my notes later on, like to summarize, man meets God. God's messing with us because it's funny.
I was just like, I think like as someone who isn't religious, it was interesting kind of reading this from that lens of just like, yeah, he's just kind of bored, wants to see what happens. It the cult following and everything as well, it felt very rooted in reality at times, which is what
Yeah.
made it feel more real and more heavy hitting at times. But it was really cool just to kind of see that play out. And being from Oregon, it was nice that it wasn't Oregon that broke off. It was nice that it was California.
Yeah, I had lived in LA for just a very short time back in 2005, so I had a little bit of personal familiarity with the city. So I was like, it's a good second location for the book just because I knew it. Um, yeah, yeah, like I wanted I mixed a lot of surreal and real in the book,
Mhm.
but also like the overall tone is very absurdist. And that
Yeah.
really comes through in the final chapters. It's like, really, man, like this is what's going on. This was what it's all about. Um, and I thought that was really fun for me to kind of explore that angle of it. Yeah.
I'd made a note as I was reading towards the end that said Mark's story is a kind of odyssey of self-discovery. But if you followed Dana instead, she basically goes through the plot of like Dune, where she's
Right.
Yeah,
like the stuff has all been
Lisa,
set up
Gunny.
for her to be the chosen one.
Right.
And so,
Like,
like
Well,
she's Paul Atreides, Mark is just kind of there, and we get his perspective, which I think is much more entertaining in terms of
yeah,
prophecy.
I'm glad you mentioned that too because now that you know kind of how I started the book, it was all about Mark, and actually the working title for my book all the way through the first draft was Mark the Jerk. That's literally what like my file
really?
is still called on my computer. My Scrivener file is called Mark the Jerk. But when I got to the end and I was able to like understand the theme of the book, I was like, it's not about Mark. I mean, we're it's from his perspective and he's part of the plan, but it's really
Mhm.
Dana. I mean, she's the Paragon, right? Um, but they're all swept up in the current. That's kind of where the
Yeah.
where the the title comes from. It's about. I don't want to. I always like hesitate. Do I want to talk about the themes? I kind of want the readers to just come up with their own themes, so I won't say much unless you guys ask me specifically. But yeah, there's
What are the
theming.
themes
What are the themes? What did you have in mind?
now? My
You
sick
can
brain.
come up with your own ideas. Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to talk about was because one of my favorite parts of the book was actually when they finally get to California and they're kind of exploring and
Mm.
been 100 years and just kind like because I'm a huge fan of dystopian stories and this and that, and it felt like we had a 50-page kind of story within a story that was just so different from the rest of the tale, but at the same time, you completely created this world where like I sat there and I kind of visualized it and imagined it. Like, what would it be like if basically you had a Children of Men situation going on, but you were so isolated and you had to be self-sufficient, and then 30 years down the line, like, communities get smaller and smaller and smaller, and it was a very, I'm just kind of what was going through your mind when you were writing that? Was there inspiration behind it or
I mean, maybe kind of subconsciously, because I mean, I've seen Children of Men. It's a great, great movie.
Love it.
I've read apocalyptic novels. I've read this one.
Oh yeah, yeah, they're very post-apocalyptic.
They're very post-apocalyptic. Yeah. Um, I was gonna shout out your book if I had a chance. So I'm glad I got
Oh,
to.
thanks, man.
It's a great book. That was the third book, by the way. I've read all three. Yeah. So I guess when I got to that point, and I realized that I wanted it to have been, basically they had they had basically like time traveled to the future via the Ophanum spinning them near light speed or whatever. And
Well,
I
we're
I
going to
just
talk about relativity as well.
okay. So yeah, I guess I just kind of wanted it to be very eerie at first. Like they weren't sure. At that point, they didn't know what happened. All they knew is that nobody was there. They didn't know that they had traveled to the future. As far as they were concerned, it was still the same day.
right,
Um,
right.
so I guess I just wanted to kind of create a mysterious atmosphere where it's like where is everybody? Like why are they gone? Did they get vaporized? That's one of the things. Like, is this like barrier? Is it like, did it vaporize people? The barrier is a very multifunctional thing, and it did a lot of things. Um, but
Because it was also the like communications blackout as
yeah,
well.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, basically, Creator Junior wanted to isolate everybody in on the island. California became an island. Isolate everybody, cut off communication, sterilize them, make sure nobody got in or out, but also protect them, from outside. Like, I think you saw it on the wall, right? There was a lot of like headlines, and those headlines were really important. So I hopefully readers actually like read them
See the
close.
headlines.
Yeah.
I wrote down a swear word followed by Sim City headlines. Have you ever played Sim City?
No. Oh, I mean, I played way back in like Super Nintendo or something. Yeah, yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah, yeah. Like OG Sim City had the funniest headlines just going along the bottom of the screen the whole time, and I was like, I need to ask Chris if he's played Sim City because these headlines are hilarious,
Oh
man.
no, I mean, it wasn't an influence at all. I feel like I said, I played it back when I mean, I'm 40, so I was 7 or 8 years old or something like that when that Super NES one came out. But um yeah, no, no, no. There was a lot of kind of information in those headlines about kind of what was going on for them. with the sterilization, but the animals are still able to breed, and communications cut off and all that stuff. So I forgot what the original question was, but yeah.
So
Yeah,
we've got,
go
go
on.
right.
No, I was just gonna say, like, for viewers, I am six. I'm very much on the back end of this one. I don't remember either. It's a fever dream right now.
So we've got about 10 minutes or so. So I want to just start kind of rattling through the stuff that I wanted to say for the end.
Sure.
So the first one was, this is an easy one. I like to ask authors if these little decisions are deliberate. So obviously the Ophanim or the Ophanim or however you want to pronounce it is the chariot of God
Yeah.
in Ezekiel, I believe it is.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
through
Yeah.
all my writing and reading and stuff, I've learned a lot about like old like Catholic scripture and like the I can't remember what you call it. It's too early in the morning, but the books that were taken out of the original Bibles and stuff,
Right, right.
where a lot of these descriptions of angels and stuff come from. Uh, but the bar, people might not have noticed this. The bar is called anaphora, which is part of the communion the Catholics do. Was that all deliberate? Did you do a bit of research for all that kind of stuff?
That was not. That's actually the name of an old band I was in high school, an
Oh,
Afro.
get out.
So you
Wasn't
made a
deliberate.
connection that wasn't
We've gone full
intentional.
circle. Wow.
Well, it worked. You know?
Yeah, that's awesome. I love the unintentional connections that people can make, which is great. Yeah.
The other thing, so this might have been unintentional as well. Then Creator Junior, not God, but kind of like
Right.
God, like one below the Creator, Creator
Right,
Junior,
right.
obviously.
Yeah.
Was that a deliberate reference to the kind of Gnostic idea of the demiurge, or was that coincidence?
Sorry, it cut out just a tiny bit as you were saying that. A reference to what?
Was that a reference to the Gnostic, like the ancient Christian thing about the demiurge, which is like there's God and then there's the guy who makes our world?
So no, that was literally just me thinking, it would be too on the nose to just have this like Deus ex machina and have it actually be
Literally,
Deus. Like I did, I was like,
yeah.
that's, I was like, so let's make it interesting and just have it be a god-like figure who doesn't even know where they came from. Like it's like
Yeah.
I didn't create all this, right? Like this was here when I was when I came into being. I just
Yeah.
can be with it. So obviously somebody created me
Also,
first, so
yeah. Well, I thought when I was reading it, I could see the book climbing up the kind of meta ladder. And I was like, we're getting closer and closer to the top. And I thought there was a moment where I thought that Creator Junior was going to reveal that the creator was a guy called Chris Porter who lives in Japan or something, like come full circle with it. Were you ever tempted?
no, no, I was never gonna go that far. No, no, that's I gotta regret it now. That would have been fun.
But now if
Yeah,
there's
that'd
a
be good.
sequel, we know exactly the direction it goes to.
So there's another part in the book where Mark asks, I think they're listening to music, and he says, "What genre is this?" And I thought that was funny because I had the same question the whole way through the book. I was like, "What genre is this?"
Right.
Was that a little meta-textual nod as well, or
That
was
that was
that?
not no no, but I struggle to this day to tell people what genre this is. I mean, I don't know. I still don't know. I think I filed it under fantasy an absurdist fiction or something like that. But
Yeah,
yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I really didn't know how to categorize. It's got sci-fi elements and fantasy elements, but it's also like absurdist and humorous and there's a love story and I don't know. I didn't really know how
yeah.
to categorize it.
This
There's
this might.
also the.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
I
you
was
go,
just gonna
Ryan.
say, this might be a better question for both of you since you're both authors and I'm not. Obviously, we have the element here with Creator Junior. To what extent, like how similar was writing Creator Junior and what he was doing compared to just like your guys' experience as an author? Because that's essentially what like I see the relation between like you guys are creating a story, he's creating a story. Was that ever considered? Or
That's I
I
mean
know
that's
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 weird.
that's absolutely what Creator Junior is doing. It's
Yeah.
it's he's telling a story to himself, but he's using real people, you know what I mean, to as his pieces, right? Whereas I am making these fictional characters move and do things.
Right.
Um, and literally as I was building the story, like I said, I was just throwing interesting things into the mix to see what would happen. And it was for my own entertainment. I mean, I was writing this book for myself. I
Yeah.
didn't have I didn't even think that I was going to query it. I was just because I'm just going to self-publish this because I don't want to change the story for anybody. I'm just writing this for fun. It's got so many inside jokes and references and Easter eggs that only I care about. I was like, I just really wanted to write something that was like fun and interesting to me. And if other people enjoyed it, that's a bonus, of course, and of course I wanted to write the best book I could and I wanted it to be enjoyable for other people. But in the end, it was just like, I just want to entertain myself. And that's what creator genius are doing. He's just, I mean, he does
Mhm.
have a heart. I mean, he does care about humanity, which is why he didn't want them to all just like perish. He had like high hopes for like Dana, who was very good and kind and kind of like the pinnacle, the paragon, right? To kind of put humanity on a new path, that doesn't worship him because he hated that. Uh, but no, that's a good observation. I never thought about it exactly like that, but sure. I mean, that's kind of what's going on. It's playing with people's lives, right?
Fair.
I'll give
Appreciate
a
that.
much simpler I'll give a much simpler version where literally because my books take place in my head canonically, I'm God in that universe, but
Right.
I'm not a good God. So anything bad
Yeah,
that
you're
happens,
not
I'm
you're not
like,
the nicest to your characters, man.
yeah, flawed, horrible God that rules over it. But there's occasional references made to that, and like because it all comes from a Dungeons and Dragons game. Occasionally, if people like touch the outer sphere of existence, they'll be like, "Wait, this guy sitting in his living room." Like, so we've got what 4 minutes.
Yeah.
This is a question. I just wanted you to know that when the Ophanim is asked a question or something and he's like, no, and then winks with all of his eyes, I laughed out loud, and it's not often that a book gets me to laugh out loud. And then I wish I'd asked this earlier, but I think we could talk about this for hours and hours. Tell me about your relationship with punk music
Oh, wow. All right. So
in 1 minute.
back, yeah, oh geez.
Yeah,
Okay,
in
so
like 90 seconds.
back in high school, so like this is 2000, 2001-ish for me. Um I got into punk music. There was like some older, punks in my school and I kind of looked up to those guys and eventually they like invited me out and introduced me to some like punk bands. So I think that the first like hardcore punk band I ever heard was Filth, which is
Oh yeah,
Blatz's
yeah.
in in the story. And it just kind of grew from there, but it was very short-lived. I mean, I still listen to a few bands from that time. I actually pulled a couple because I was hoping you'd talk about. So there's
Oh
Anti-Schism, which I
nice, yeah.
mentioned there. Here's Filth and Blatz. So
Oh yeah.
there's Blatz
Oh
right there.
yeah. Okay.
That's the shit split. That's literally you mentioned, right? Initial State, Bad Brains. I mean, these are bands that I still love to this day. Um, so like I said, yeah, it was just a couple years of my life when I was a teenager that I was really like hardcore into punk. And I kind of got out of the scene, so to speak. But I think I've always kind of carried kind of that rebellious spirit within me since then. I think it actually did have quite a long-lasting effect on me. And I thought like what a great element to add to this story to have this kind of like punk undercurrent. So that was fun for me to
Yeah.
write.
And just in the
I
next
think yeah.
I was gonna say, in the next 2.5 minutes, I want to say first off, I love Blatz as a character. Blatz was hilarious. I thought she was
Oh
wonderful.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we haven't really talked about the side characters, but like they were great. I thought that the dynamic they had between each other, and then obviously with Mark and Dana, because Dana just fit right into the group, and then Mark was, yeah, he like eased his way in. Then you had the lady that they met on the bus and everything, and it all tied together
Zelda.
in a nice way. But in the last minute and 45 seconds, I want to ask for people who liked Paragon on the current, what's the best way? Like, if I remember, you don't have any other books written at the moment.
Nothing
Are,
else,
are
yeah.
you working on anything at the moment? Like, what's the best way readers can get a hold of you, keep up with your work?
Yeah, so I have like notes on my phone like filled with ideas for a future novel, as most writers do, but nothing like in progress yet. I'm waiting to really feel like, okay, yeah, I'm ready. I have the idea,
Yeah.
because it's a lot of work to write a book and you really need to be committed to it and really want to write it because it takes a lot of time. I have two
Word.
kids and a wife, and you spend a lot of time away from them when you're working on a book. So yeah, but so nothing like right now, but hopefully in the future I will have another book out. If you want to follow my progress, Twitter, I still call it Twitter, is probably the best place to follow me. So it's at C Porter Music. I used to be a composer. I guess I still am, but I don't really compose much anymore. But that's the best one. That's kind of like my general Twitter account, and I post about writing, but I also post about what music I'm listening to and books or books I'm reading, movies I'm watching, just very general stuff. I'm also on Instagram. You can find me. I don't even know my handle. Christopher underscore J underscore Porter. I'm on Blue Sky again. CJ Porter author.
We'll make sure to get all the links in the
Yeah.
comment section when I draft this up. We've got about 15 seconds left. So I just want to
Okay.
say thank you so much, Chris, for joining us, for getting the time zones right and everything. We really appreciate the flexibility. If you've somehow made it this far, Paragon the Current, fantastic novel, great artwork.
Get
Please
it read.
have it.
Oh, David Nuttall is the author or the artist, by the way.